Billionaire CEO panics without a Chinese translator until the black janitor takes over. And how in God's name is this happening now? David Wellington barked into his phone, his voice reverberating across the polished marble floors of the 45th floor at Wellington Industries. The multimillionaire CEO paced relentlessly inside his sleek glass-walled office, eyes fixed on the motorcade pulling up to the front entrance below. 3 gleaming black cars had just delivered the visiting Chinese delegation. A wave of dread rippled through David's chest as his assistant's voice broke through the chaos. "Mr. Wellington, I've called every interpreter in the city," Rebecca stammered, phone practically fused to her ear. "No one can handle a meeting of this scale on 15 minutes notice." David tugged at his finely tailored Italian tie, sweat collecting on his brow. 20 years of building Wellington Industries from the ground up, and it was all about to unravel over a missing translator. The Chinese delegation was renowned for their strict adherence to protocol. They would never tolerate a deal of this magnitude being mediated through a cheap phone app or sloppy pantomime. Just as panic threatened to overtake him, a gentle, almost hesitant voice rose from the corner of the office. "Mr. Wellington, if I may. I can help. I speak Mandarin." The room fell into stunned silence. Standing there with a cleaning rag in one hand, wearing the plain navy uniform of the janitorial staff, was Jasmine Parker. She had been polishing the glass conference table before quietly pausing to listen to the conversation. For 3 years she had worked these floors, unnoticed by the powerful men and women she served, blending into the background like part of the furniture. Rebecca let out a high-pitched, incredulous laugh. "Jasmine, this is a $200 million contract negotiation, not a lunch order. Please be serious." David squinted at her, as if seeing her for the first time. "Wait. You speak Mandarin?" His voice was a strange mix of suspicion and desperate hope. Jasmine stood straight, unflinching. "Mandarin. Cantonese. And some Taiwanese dialects," she answered calmly, meeting his eyes with a quiet strength that made even Rebecca falter. "I have a degree in East Asian linguistics from Howard University. I worked as an interpreter before taking this job." A tense silence wrapped around them. David could feel the weight of the entire deal pressing on his shoulders. The Chinese executives would be walking through that door in less than 10 minutes. Rebecca's face went from mocking to annoyed. "David, you cannot be serious. A cleaning lady, this is the biggest deal we've ever had." But David couldn't ignore the composure in Jasmine's stance, nor the steel in her tone. "Prove it," he demanded, voice sharp. "Say something. Anything." Jasmine inhaled deeply, then spoke. Her Mandarin flowed flawlessly, crisp and confident, carrying a dignity that made even David's skin prickle. "Women han jiaoxing neng zajali yunin zionjiao, ziwang women de hezuo changong." Even though he understood none of it, David could feel the authenticity and power behind her words. "What did you say?" he asked, still recovering from shock. Jasmine offered a small smile. "I said it is an honor to meet you here, and that we hope our cooperation will be successful." For the first time all day, a flicker of hope returned to David's eyes. Jasmine had listened for years, learning not only the languages but the subtleties of how these executives negotiated, how they planned, how they thought. She had prepared for this moment without ever knowing she would need to step up. He drew a deep breath. "Jasmine," he said, voice steadier now, "get ready. You're about to run the most important meeting of your life." A sense of purpose seemed to light in Jasmine's eyes as she folded her rag and set it aside, ready to step forward into a world that, until now, had never even seen her. "Cooperation will bring mutually beneficial results," Jasmine translated smoothly. It's a respectful, standard business greeting in Chinese culture. Rebecca's jaw tightened, her arms folding defensively across her chest as she glared at Jasmine, then back at David. David, think about this for a second. What are they going to think if you bring a cleaning lady to a 200 million executive negotiation? In that instant, a memory shot through Jasmine's mind like a jolt of electricity. 6 months ago, she had stumbled upon Rebecca sobbing into her phone in the executive restroom, ranting about that black girl who hangs around the important meetings. Jasmine had pretended not to hear back then, but the words had carved themselves into her memory, deep and sharp. For a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into infinity, David studied Jasmine. There was something in her eyes that cut through the noise, an unspoken confidence, a resilient intelligence, a dignity that stood out starkly against the way she'd been treated for years. She had been here 3 years, wiping fingerprints from conference tables and polishing floors, while absorbing more about the company than half of the executives ever had. You have 20 minutes to get ready, David finally declared, ignoring Rebecca's incredulous gasp. Find something appropriate and meet me in the conference room. As Jasmine turned to leave, heart pounding in her chest, Rebecca hissed under her breath, fury rising in her voice. David, you've lost your mind. When this blows up in your face, you'll lose everything. But David didn't respond. He was no longer listening to Rebecca's fear or prejudice. For the first time in years, he felt he was seeing clearly, realizing the greatest asset in his empire might have been hidden in plain sight, carrying a mop. Jasmine, meanwhile, felt a powerful sense of purpose wash over her. She had been preparing for this moment in ways no one could imagine, silently studying the language of power, strategy, and negotiation while scrubbing floors. Rebecca, with all her arrogance and thinly veiled racism, was about to learn the hardest lesson of all: underestimating someone based on appearance was the biggest mistake she could make. If you're enjoying this story of resilience and triumph, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can see how Jasmine takes charge of the deal and leaves an entire boardroom speechless. 20 minutes later, Jasmine walked back into the sleek glass-walled conference room, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversation died in a single, awkward heartbeat. Gone was the navy janitorial uniform. In its place, Jasmine wore a fitted black dress loaned by the receptionist, modest yet professional. Her hair had been pulled back into a smooth, confident bun, framing her calm, composed face. She held a leather notepad against her chest, looking every bit the poised business executive. Jesus Christ, Thomas, the CFO, muttered, unable to mask his shock. Rebecca leaned toward one of the assistants, not even bothering to whisper discreetly. You can polish a piece of coal, but it's still coal inside, she sneered. Jasmine heard the words but refused to let them pierce her resolve. Outside the conference room, the Chinese delegation arrived precisely on time, their movements as seamless and respectful as their reputation. 5 impeccably dressed executives stepped into the sunlit space, exchanging quiet conversation in Mandarin while appreciating the skyline view of Manhattan. David took a breath, then introduced Jasmine with steady authority, deliberately glossing over her true position. This is Jasmine Parker, our international relations specialist for the Asian market, he announced, with a carefully measured tone. Mr. Chun, the leader of the delegation, inclined his head politely. Jasmine responded with a graceful bow, seamlessly switching to Mandarin as she thanked him for the honor of meeting and praised the group's punctuality, a subtle yet powerful sign of respect in Chinese culture. Mr. Chun's eyes lit up with genuine delight, visibly impressed by her confident, authentic fluency. The energy in the room shifted immediately, curiosity replacing caution among the visitors. For the first 15 minutes, Jasmine guided the conversation with steady poise. She navigated small talk with cultural precision, referencing not only Chinese etiquette but their previous business ventures, their partners, and even their corporate philanthropic efforts, facts she had picked up over countless hours of discreet observation while cleaning their offices. The delegation began to relax, their voices growing warmer, more engaged. David watched, amazed, as Jasmine dismantled barriers in minutes that might have otherwise torpedoed months of negotiations. Rebecca fidgeted in her seat, unable to hide her disapproval, while Thomas sat with his jaw practically on the table, astounded by Jasmine's skill. No one in that room, except perhaps Jasmine herself, had truly believed she would be capable of commanding such a high-stakes meeting. But here she was rewriting the rules, one carefully chosen word at a time. Jasmine continued translating with a precision that bordered on surgical. She didn't just convey the literal words, but captured the subtle cultural nuances, the tone, the gentle diplomacy, the bits of understated humor that drew genuine laughter from the Chinese executives. The conversation flowed so smoothly it seemed almost effortless, exceeding even David's most hopeful expectations. That was when Rebecca decided to strike. "Jasmine," she interrupted, a thinly veiled smirk spreading across her lips, "maybe you should share your unique journey with our guests. It's so inspiring to see someone reinvent themselves. You know, moving up in life." David shot her a look that could have burned through steel, but Rebecca pressed on, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "After all," she continued, "who would have imagined that the same young woman cleaning these very rooms 3 years ago would now be seated at this table?" The condescension was unmistakable, echoing in the sudden hush of the room. Jasmine felt that old, familiar sting, the same deep, hollow humiliation that had followed her since she was 18, when she had been forced to drop out of Howard University halfway through her junior year after her mother's diabetes took a turn for the worse. Someone had to earn money. Someone had to keep the house standing. And that someone had been her. But now, with the entire delegation's eyes on her, Jasmine refused to let Rebecca's poison unravel her. She steadied herself, inhaling slowly. "Life has a way of revealing opportunities in unexpected ways," she replied evenly, her calm voice carrying far more strength than a raised one ever could. She paused, letting her words settle over the table. Mr. Chun watched her, brow furrowed in polite confusion. "Who would have imagined," Rebecca pushed again, "that someone who was mopping floors 3 years ago would be negotiating 200 million contracts today?" Jasmine saw it then, a subtle, almost imperceptible change in Mr. Chun's face. Not outright disgust, but a shift toward uncomfortable surprise. In Chinese business culture, professional status and hierarchy were non-negotiable pillars of respect. Rebecca's remark, whether she realized it or not, had broken that fragile sense of trust Jasmine had so carefully built. David tried to recover, jumping in with forced enthusiasm. "What Rebecca means is that we value talent wherever it appears." But the damage was already done. Over the next 15 minutes, Jasmine noticed the shift in the delegation. The Chinese executives remained polite and courteous, but their glances were different, less open, more guarded. The ease and goodwill that had filled the room earlier was gone, replaced by a cautious formality. Jasmine had become a curiosity to them, not a respected professional. As the meeting continued, something inside Jasmine solidified. For 3 years, she had moved invisibly through these offices, polishing glass tables while executives brokered deals worth millions. She had heard every negotiation, every flawed pitch, every dirty secret. And she had never spoken a word, never revealed the things she had witnessed. Like the time Rebecca had lied about quarterly sales to impress a visiting investor. Or when she stole credit for a subordinate's project, leading to that employee being unfairly fired for budget cuts. Or the time she de-leaked confidential financial data to give herself leverage in a private negotiation. Jasmine had seen it all. And she had remembered. The meeting ended with only a cautious preliminary agreement. The Chinese delegation politely promised to consider the proposal diplomatic code for "we'll think about it if nothing better comes along." As they gathered their briefcases and left, Rebecca could barely hide her smug grin. "Well, that was educational," she said, arranging her folders with a flourish. "Maybe next time we'll be clearer about our team's credentials from the start." David was visibly seething, struggling to maintain his composure. Before he could speak, Jasmine rose from her chair, calm and steady. "Rebecca," she said, her voice gentle but carrying a quiet, unexpected authority. Rebecca turned, arching an eyebrow in mock interest. "Yes, Jasmine." "Mr. Chun mentioned something rather interesting before he left," Jasmine continued, carefully watching Rebecca's expression. "Oh really, and what was that?" Rebecca asked, feigning boredom. Jasmine let the silence hang just long enough to draw every eye in the room. "He said he was impressed by my language skills," she began, but was confused by the hierarchy of our team. "He felt there was, how did he put it, a conflict between what we say about valuing talent and how we actually treat that talent." Rebecca's face froze, the color draining from her cheeks. Jasmine let the weight of her words settle over the conference room like a quiet storm. "He asked if I could call him later to clarify some cultural points about our presentation," she said, measuring each word with care. Rebecca's mask slipped for just a moment, her confidence wavering. "What points exactly?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Jasmine's calm never faltered. "Mainly," she explained, "why the person responsible for translation wasn't introduced as the lead negotiator. In their culture, the one who speaks the language is automatically perceived as the authority." She allowed that truth to sink in, a small, almost gentle smile crossing her lips. "He said he'd like to better understand our organizational structure before making any final decisions." Rebecca's face paled, the implications hitting her with the subtlety of a freight train. For 3 long years, Jasmine had existed in the background, a silent presence, unseen and underestimated. But invisibility, she was beginning to understand, could be the most powerful weapon of all. Every insult, every humiliating moment, every small cruelty had become kindling, feeding something far stronger than simple resentment. They had created a strategist, one who knew every weakness, every hidden secret, every lie floating through these polished corridors. 2 hours after the meeting, Jasmine was back in her navy uniform, pushing her cleaning cart down the familiar hallway. But this time every step was calculated, every observation razor sharp. She had memorized the conversations, the secrets left exposed in half-shredded documents, the careless moments when executives forgot they weren't alone. Especially Rebecca's carelessness. Rebecca's voice rang out like a poisoned bell, loud enough for half the floor to hear. "Look who's back where she belongs," she announced to Jennifer from accounting, smirking like a cat that had cornered a mouse. "After that pathetic circus, at least we know who belongs in the conference room and who belongs scrubbing toilets." Jasmine kept moving, hands steady on her mop, her face unreadable. But her mind was on fire, cataloging every word. Rebecca had no clue that Jasmine had spent 3 years noticing the personal emails left open on her desk, overhearing whispered phone calls about manipulating contracts, even photographing the documents she hid in the bottom drawer, documents outlining unfair competition strategies targeting minority-owned companies. You know what really bothers me, Rebecca continued to Jennifer, practically flaunting her arrogance. That David actually believed a cleaning lady could rescue a $200 million contract. As if scrubbing floors gives you the right to sit with real executives. Jasmine's phone buzzed discreetly in her pocket. She pulled it out, glancing quickly at the message. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the Chinese characters. It was from Mr. Chun. Ms. Parker, I would like to discuss a future opportunity with you. Could you meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the Mandarin Cafe on 42nd Street? Her pulse thundered in her ears. This was about more than language skills. In those tense hours in the conference room, Mr. Chun had seen her. Seen her composure, her poise, the steel under pressure. That night, back in her modest Brooklyn apartment, Jasmine opened a folder on her laptop, a file she had built slowly over 2 years. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. 3 years moving unseen through the halls of power had given her access no executive could have imagined. Wellington Industries irregularities. 63 pages of evidence, screenshots of emails Rebecca thought she deleted. Security system logs from late nights and weekends. Photographs of documents proving that Rebecca had personally blocked promotions for black employees, sabotaged contracts with minority-owned firms, and lied to high-profile clients to cover her own mistakes. Jasmine scrolled through the pages, her fingers steady, her mind sharp. It was no longer about revenge. It was about strategy. The next morning at precisely 10 o'clock, Jasmine stepped into the Mandarin Cafe wearing a sleek, simple outfit she'd once saved for graduation, a dream cut short, now revived. Mr. Chun stood to greet her, joined by an elegant woman who introduced herself as Lisa Wong, the group's Vice President of International Development. Miss Parker, Mr. Chun began in flawless English before seamlessly shifting into Mandarin. Yesterday I observed not only your language skills, but something far more rare, your dignity and composure under unwarranted pressure. Lisa leaned in with a respectful nod. Our group is expanding in North America. We need someone who understands both Chinese culture and the hidden realities of American corporate environments. Someone who has seen things for what they really are. Mr. Chun's eyes glimmered with quiet approval. And someone, he added, who refuses to bow to small-minded people in big chairs. For 2 hours, Jasmine spoke freely about market trends, cultural pitfalls, and the unspoken codes of business she had absorbed like second nature. She even hinted, delicately, at certain irregularities in local firms without naming names, and watched as Lisa and Mr. Chun exchanged intrigued glances. At the end of the meeting, Lisa pushed a crisp business card toward her, Parker and Associates International Consulting. Printed beneath it was a salary figure that made Jasmine's breath catch in her throat, 5 times her current pay. Consider this offer, Mr. Chun said kindly as he stood, but there is one condition. We'd like you to start by helping us investigate certain discrepancies we've uncovered at Wellington Industries. There is evidence suggesting violations of international trade laws. Jasmine held the card steady, her hands calm even as her heart hammered. There's an emergency meeting at Wellington tomorrow, Lisa added in a low voice. The delegation has formally lodged a complaint. It might be wise for you to attend. That night, Jasmine called her mother. Mom, remember how you always said patience is a smart woman's strongest weapon? Her mother's gentle voice came through the line. Of course, honey. Why? Jasmine allowed a smile to break across her face. I think I finally understand what you meant. After hanging up, she stood at her window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, its lights glittering with possibility. Tomorrow, Wellington Industries and Rebecca would learn the true cost of underestimating the woman who had spent 3 years in their shadows, learning every secret, every lie, every weakness. They hadn't just ignored her. They had created her. When your opponents least expect it, that's when you strike. The next morning, the executive boardroom at Wellington Industries was thick with tension. David had called an emergency meeting after receiving a formal report from the Chinese delegation. It included allegations of serious contract irregularities, serious enough to trigger a possible federal investigation. Rebecca swept into the room with her usual air of confidence, her red designer suit and sharp heels slicing through the hush like a blade. She had spent the entire night crafting a defense, fully convinced she could shift the blame onto the cleaning lady David had so foolishly involved. "Well," Rebecca began, addressing the 7 board members with a practiced smile, "I assume we're here to discuss yesterday's disaster. As I warned, putting an unqualified employee into a high-stakes negotiation was a reckless move. It's now jeopardizing $200 million. At that moment, the door opened quietly. Jasmine stepped inside wearing a flawless gray ensemble, not borrowed this time but purchased with the advance the Chinese company had given her. A leather briefcase swung from her hand, her laptop tucked under her arm. She moved with the confidence of someone who had finally claimed her rightful place. "My apologies for being late," Jasmine said, her voice even and unshaken. "I was finishing up some documentation for this meeting." Rebecca's face tightened with disbelief and barely hidden rage. "With all due respect, David," she snapped, "why is she here? This is an executive board meeting." David's reply was ice cold. "She's here because the Chinese delegation specifically requested her presence to clarify the accusations they have made." Jasmine calmly set up her laptop and projected the first document on the screen. "Mr. Chun came to me yesterday with specific concerns," she began, her tone measured and calm. "Concerns about evidence of bid rigging and sabotage against smaller, competing companies." Rebecca's head snapped around, eyes bulging. "That's ridiculous." She spat. "What kind of evidence could a cleaning lady possibly have?" Jasmine gave a gentle, devastating smile. "The kind of evidence," she replied, "collected by someone invisible for 3 years, while executives spoke openly in front of her as if she didn't even exist." Rebecca's mask of certainty cracked for the first time. Jasmine clicked to the first slide, an internal email from Rebecca to a client, dated 6 months earlier, leaking confidential information about a rival's contract proposals. The boardroom fell so silent you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Rebecca tried to interrupt, but Jasmine continued with iron calm. "The second document," she explained, "demonstrates how Rebecca inflated the costs of projects led by Black and Latino staff, forcing their cancellation and then blaming them for incompetence. Spreadsheets, edited emails, video clips from security cameras all appeared on the screen, one after the other, irrefutable." Rebecca bolted upright, her voice trembling. "This is a setup. She's faking these documents to get revenge because I exposed her." Jasmine stayed perfectly still. "Mr. David," she said softly, "the next evidence comes from the company's own security system, 8 months ago." Rebecca's own voice filled the speakers. "We can't let those kinds of people think they belong in executive meeting rooms. It's about protecting standards." Rebecca's face turned ghost white. She remembered that conversation, a hushed talk with Thomas about keeping the wrong people out of power. Jasmine moved to the final slide. "And this," she continued, "is from 2 weeks ago, when Rebecca instructed the receptionist to lose resumes from candidates with names that sounded too ethnic. One of the board members, Mr. Johnson, a black man with 15 years at the company, leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "Rebecca," he demanded, "is that true?" Rebecca's voice broke. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under to maintain standards." Jasmine met her gaze with steady, unflinching calm. "Company standards," she said, "include ethics, integrity, and federal anti-discrimination laws. All of which you have systematically violated." David spoke next, his tone lethal. "You have 30 seconds, he told Rebecca, "to explain why you should not be terminated for cause and reported to federal prosecutors." Rebecca looked wildly around the table, searching for support. There was none. Only disgust and disappointment. "You're making a terrible mistake," she pleaded, voice cracking. "She's just a resentful cleaning lady who—" David cut her off. He said, his voice thundering, "is our new Director of International Relations. And you are fired." Silence. Pure, absolute silence. Rebecca staggered as if struck, her 15-year career dissolving in seconds. "Your access will be revoked immediately," David continued. "Security will escort you to collect your personal items." As two guards stepped forward, David added, "Rebecca, considering the seriousness of these accusations, we are forwarding all evidence to the district attorney." Rebecca glared at Jasmine, venom dripping from her stare. "You may have won today," she hissed as security led her away, "but you'll always be just a cleaning lady." Jasmine's calm never wavered. "You're right," she replied evenly. "I am exactly what I have always been, someone who listens, learns, and acts at the right moment." Rebecca was gone. 3 hours later, after the board confirmed Jasmine as Director of International Relations, David approached her privately. "How did you do it?" he asked in a hushed voice. 3 years of evidence, recordings, documents." Jasmine allowed herself a real smile for the first time in days. "When you treat someone like furniture," she answered, "you forget that furniture sees and hears everything." She looked out across the city skyline, a feeling of pride blooming inside her. Rebecca underestimated the power of being invisible. And she overestimated the value of her own arrogance. Jasmine had no illusions that her work would be easy, but for the first time, she felt free to build something that was hers alone. The best revenge was not destroying Rebecca, it was proving that she could build an empire greater than Rebecca could ever dream of. 6 months later, Jasmine sat in her new corner office on the 38th floor, reviewing contracts with Asian companies. The glass desk overflowed with documents in Mandarin, Cantonese, and English, negotiations she had personally orchestrated. In half a year, her work had brought in more than 400 million in fresh deals, expanding Wellington Industries into an international force. Her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, a dinner with the Chinese delegation. As she looked out at the Manhattan skyline glittering beyond her window, she felt no anger, only purpose. 3 years of being invisible had taught her how power truly worked. And this time, she would write every word of her own story with her name, her signature, and her legacy. "Jasmine, the South Korean delegation has arrived," Jennifer announced, stepping into the sleek office. Once an anonymous cleaning lady, Jasmine now had Jennifer as her personal assistant. "They're eager to meet the woman who tripled our Asian business in just 6 months." Jasmine glanced out the towering windows at a Manhattan skyline that had once seemed so far out of reach. Now, as Wellington Industries Director of International Relations, she was one of the city's most respected young executives. Her new annual salary of $300,000 had secured the best medical treatment for her mother's diabetes and allowed Jasmine to complete a master's degree through Columbia's executive program, a dream she once believed was lost forever. "What about the Forbes meeting next week?" Jennifer asked, reviewing her crowded calendar. Jasmine adjusted the navy blue blazer she wore, this time not out of necessity but by choice. "Confirmed," she replied with a calm, confident nod. "They want to discuss my nomination to the list of the country's most influential young female executives." Across town, in a cramped apartment in Queens, Rebecca sat alone. After being evicted from her Manhattan condo, she now faced a mountain of medical bills for therapy, along with dozens of rejection letters from companies unwilling to touch her tainted name. The federal investigation into her discriminatory practices had cost her a $50,000 personal fine and a 5-year ban from working in any executive role connected to federal contracts. That morning, she had seen Jasmine's smiling face on the cover of Business Week, standing proudly among Chinese executives under the headline, "The Translator Who Revolutionized International Business." The irony struck her like a slap. Back at Wellington Industries, David had gathered the entire board to share the company's remarkable quarterly results. "Jasmine Parker didn't just save our Chinese partnership," he announced proudly. "She opened doors to markets we never thought we could enter." Mr. Johnson, the veteran director who had witnessed Rebecca's downfall, stood up with genuine admiration in his voice. "In over 40 years in corporate America," he declared, "I have rarely seen a transformation as profound as the one Jasmine has achieved. She's proven that true talent knows no color, no class, and absolutely no place for prejudice." Applause echoed around the room as Jasmine stayed modestly in her seat, her mind flashing back to the years she'd spent cleaning that same boardroom. That evening, Jasmine returned to her newly renovated Upper East Side apartment. The phone rang with a familiar voice. "Honey, I saw your interview today on TV," her mother said, pride warm in her tone. "You spoke so beautifully about second chances." Jasmine smiled softly. "I learned from the best," she replied. "You always told me, no one can diminish what you know or what you're capable of, no matter how hard they try." During the TV interview, a reporter had asked Jasmine whether she still felt resentment toward Rebecca. Jasmine's answer had been poised and graceful. "Rebecca gave me the greatest gift she could have," she told the nation. "She showed me exactly who I never wanted to become. Her arrogance and prejudice taught me that real power comes from lifting others up, not stepping on them." 3 weeks later, Jasmine returned to Howard University, the place she'd once left out of necessity. Standing on stage, she announced a scholarship program for low-income students forced to interrupt their education because of family hardship. "No one," she told an audience of 500 teary-eyed students, "should have to choose between caring for their family and pursuing their dreams." Funded partly from her own salary, the Second Chance program had already approved 20 full scholarships for the coming semester. Far across town, Rebecca watched the live stream on a cracked laptop in her tiny apartment. For the first time in months, her tears weren't those of self-pity, but something closer to genuine regret. Back at Wellington Industries, Jasmine now walked the same corridors where she'd once pushed a cleaning cart, and young executives greeted her with respect. Secretaries asked for her career advice. She had even become a mentor to 5 promising employees working in operational roles, people with the same untapped potential she'd once carried herself. During a private moment, David pulled her aside. "Jasmine," he said, still in awe, "you could have used everything you knew to utterly destroy Rebecca. But you only exposed her professional misconduct. Why?" Jasmine's calm smile held a quiet grace. Because the best revenge, she explained, isn't destroying someone. It's building something so extraordinary that it makes everything they did to hold you back irrelevant. Jasmine Parker's story had proven, beyond any doubt, that dignity, resilience, and patient preparation could triumph over even the deepest prejudice. Her 3 years of invisibility had turned into the greatest advantage of her career, transforming her from an overlooked worker into a true leader. Rebecca had tried to humiliate her and dismiss her potential, but in the end, had only revealed her own fatal flaws. Jasmine had taught the corporate world a lasting lesson: true leadership does not come from titles or privilege. It comes from seeing possibility where others see only limitation, and from never underestimating those you think are beneath you. As she gazed at the skyline that night, Jasmine understood, in a world built to silence people like her, she had found her voice and no one would ever take it away again.